I mean, it's all about perception, isn't it? I mean, do you feel that the Chancellor, that Rachel Reeves, is rapidly becoming the Minister for putting a brave face on things? She hasn't really had any good news to bring us since she got in, has she? Let alone her personal predicaments with her CV.
Well, I don't accept that. And I think, you know, we have inherited a really difficult position. And I think the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were clear there were going to be difficult decisions that the government was going to have to take. But as I said, you know, we have seen cuts to interest rates. We're seeing wages going up and growing more than over the last 3 years. So there's some prospects there of
I don't know. I mean, you say a bumpy
news.
road, but things do seem to be heading in the wrong direction, don't they? With inflation going up, Bank of England recently halving its growth forecast from 1.5% to 0.75% this year, and that does just mean that things are even harder for people, aren't they?
I fully appreciate, you know, we've gone through a cost of living crisis under the previous government when we had that disastrous budget from Liz Truss and her Chancellor. So things are not easy. But I would also point to some of the forecasts that have been made, for example, by the IMF, which points to our economy being the fastest growing in Europe in the next few years. So I think there are, you know, I'm not decrying or doing down the fact that it is difficult for families and individuals. I fully appreciate that. But it is a bumpy road, but I think the Chancellor's going in the right direction.
All right, well, let's talk about something which you're very much here to talk about this morning and which has, broadly speaking, been welcomed generally this morning, your new anti-knife measures. And this, to boil it down, means that people who sell knives, whether it's in a shop or online, to kids, are going to go to jail.
Yeah, well, we're going to increase the sentencing from 6 months, as it currently is, to 2 years. And I think in the past there's been this focus on possession of knives, and that's absolutely right. But we also now need to focus on the supply of knives, particularly to under 18s. And that's why we're putting the sentence up. And we're also putting forward a number of other requirements around online sales where there's bulk purchasing or suspicious purchasing. That has to be reported into the police. We're setting up a new police unit to actually deal with that information and make sure that we can tackle and target those individuals who are perhaps buying in bulk and then using, say, Instagram or TikTok to sell to people without any proper checks. So there are a number of measures we're announcing today. And, of course, this is known as Ronan's Law because of that horrific attack on Ronan Kanda in 2022. And we know the perpetrators of that horrific knife crime were 16 years old, had been able to go online and use, I think, one of the mother's bank cards and ID details to purchase weapons. I think 25 deadly weapons were purchased by one of the perpetrators. And the ninja sword that was used to kill Ronan was actually that morning collected from the post office, and no checks were carried out when that parcel was picked up.
And it was a shocking case. We spoke to Pooja, Ronan's mum, earlier on the programme this morning, and, you know, she's been obviously at the forefront of the fight to get these changes. There are concerns, though, aren't there, that this, although it's a step forward, won't actually help to break this link, because there is still the question of why young people feel the need to carry knives, and the fact that even if some of the routes for them to access a knife are shut down, let's face it, there are still knives in kitchens, there are ways of them getting hold of knives. What are you going to be able to do to tackle the root causes of this? Because we've got the Action on Armed Violence spokesperson. He's been saying it's poverty, it's lack of opportunity, it's a breakdown of community structures. And until you sort out those problems, then the issues with young people using knives is still going to carry on.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There is not one thing that you can do to solve this problem with knives. What we're announcing today are measures I think will have some effect, but I also think you need to do the preventative work. You need to get alongside those young people who are on the verge of getting involved in knife crime and put the support in they need to understand that carrying a knife is not about protecting yourself. So I think that preventative work is important. We're going to set up prevention partnerships, identifying those young people most at risk and putting in the support that they need. We're also going after the suppliers, making sure that they are responsible, that they are not selling to under 18-year-olds. And we've also got the Coalition for Tackling Knife Crime, which the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary set up when Labour came into power. And that's the victims and the families of victims of knife crime, the campaigners who are challenging the government and bringing up ideas about what more needs to be done. So I think it's a collection of things that we need to actually do. We're not going to solve this with one measure or two measures.
Let's just come back to how the law would be actually enforced with these rogue suppliers who are selling these knives to kids? Let's say that that a teenager buys a knife online illegally. It's sold to them. Let's say they're 14 years old. Who would you go after, and how would you prove the case? Would you go after the individual who actually processed the order and ticked off on it, or would you go after the person who owns the business that actually runs that platform, or both?
You make a very important point, and it may be that we go after both. So the chief executive of an online retailer who is allowing knives to be sold to under 18s, there's clearly an issue there, and perhaps the individual who's actually making the transaction and not going through the proper verification and age checks. We've also announced recently that there will be now a requirement around producing a photographic ID, a passport or a driving licence to show that you are of age to buy a knife or a bladed weapon. And when that is delivered to your home, the person delivering is going to have to check that that person who bought the knife is the person who it's being delivered to. So there are various measures that we are going to introduce, but you're absolutely right. It could be the chief executive, it could be the person actually making the sale.
And are you going to expect those people to simply understand that the law is about to change, or are you going to target them? Are you going to give them, if you like, a warning shot? Are they going to be sent emails or letters explaining to them what will happen to them if they continue to sell knives to underage children?
Well, clearly at the moment, it is an offence to sell a knife to under 18s. I mean, that is the law at the moment. So I'm sure there will be more information that will be made available. But clearly what we're doing today is saying we are taking the supply of knives to under 18s far more seriously by increasing the sentence up to 2 years. We would expect responsible retailers to know that, to be acting now to deal with the fact that they need to check ages, they need to do all the other checks that should happen. Can I also say one of the other things we're looking at is consulting on a licensing regime. Just as we have, say, for the sales of alcohol or for fireworks or firearms, having a licensing regime for retailers so that only responsible people will be allowed to sell knives, and that's going to be consulted on in the future as well. Very,
very briefly, we have the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, getting into the same kind of hot water that the Chancellor found herself in over the last few weeks, exaggerating his background. She obviously enhanced her CV, she's had to alter it. He's had to alter his because he claimed that he was a qualified solicitor and he was never qualified. What are your thoughts on that?
What I understand to be the case is that administrative errors were made about on the LinkedIn page around trainee solicitor and solicitor.
No, he told the House of Commons that he'd been a solicitor.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know, like, if you look at his website, it was very clear.
We can hear it now, actually. If we just take a pause, we can hear him say it now, because he quite clearly says he was a solicitor.
Let's have a listen.
Before the last election, I worked as a solicitor in Manchester city centre, and I would travel in to Manchester every day from what is now my constituency.
Not good, is it? Because that's actually a criminal offence.
It's a legally protected title.
To claim to be a solicitor when you're not supposed to do it.
Well, trainee solicitor, that's what was on his website. So if he misspoke in that case, I'm sure that he would want to correct the record. But he was a trainee solicitor. I think that's clear on the documents that I've seen about Jonathan. And you're absolutely right. People make mistakes and misspeak, and it may be he did that in the comments.
Is there a bit of an issue of trust here? It's obviously not the first time, is it, that we've found out that there have been embellishments, alterations on politicians' CVs, on cabinet ministers?
Well, clearly, I think we're all, as members of Parliament, wanting to be clear and upfront about any qualifications or roles that we've held. But people make mistakes. I mean, you know, administratively, things are put down that perhaps, you know, are a mistake. And I think if that's the case, then it just needs to be corrected. I think that's my approach to that.
All right. And are you comfortable with your own CV?
I hope so, yes. I've checked it regularly, and yeah, I hope so.
So you weren't actually an astronaut, though, were you?
I wasn't an astronaut, but I did qualify as a barrister. I did my training, passed my bar exams, worked in law centres. So yeah, I think my CV's up to date.
So you can claim that in that case. Dame Diana Johnson, thanks for joining us this morning.